Hey everyone, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I'm back today with another story for you. So if you are new to the channel, like and subscribe and click that little post notification bell so you get alerted when I post new videos. And now on to today's topic. So I did a story about bucket list places in the Grand Canyon, and I mentioned that I may do a video about my experiences onto the Havasupai Native American Reservation and the blue-green waters of Havasu Creek and the wonderful waterfalls like Havasu Falls and Mooney Falls that are down in this part of the Grand Canyon. And these waterfalls, they draw many people that want to experience them for themselves. They're otherworldly. But they're not the easiest to access. While they may be not quite as challenging to get to as the Thunder River in the Grand Canyon that we already talked about, that's east of here, they are still in an area that can be challenging to get to for many. First of all, these falls are on the Havasupai Native American Reservation in the western part of the Grand Canyon, kind of halfway between Las Vegas and Flagstaff, Arizona. So to get there, you first need to get permits from the tribe, and there's always way more demand than there are permits. Now, one big challenge that has been, I guess, a major situation lately is that the tribe has closed down the reservation to outsiders since COVID started in 2020. So a lot of people's reservations have been canceled, and we're running on around 3 years of this right now. So people are expecting it to open back up sometime soon to the tourist hikers, and there is a campground down there that's down by Havasu Falls that does accommodate most of the hikers that hike onto this land. There's also a lodge down there, and I can't remember if the lodge maybe has about 3 dozen rooms or so. Anyhow, and the lodge usually books up about a year in advance. I don't know what's going on with the lodge right now. Obviously, people probably have reservations for the lodge, and they're probably just getting pushed off until things open back up. But the fees have also gone up significantly. They've gone up huge since I've gone in the early 2000s, and I went a couple of times, and it was relatively cheap to go in the early 2000s. Now I think it was quite a few $100s now to go, and that's mainly for camping on the reservation. But you do get a camp right next to the creek, and it's beautiful. The waters are kind of this iridescent crystal blue green, almost like a opal pearl type of with a blue tint to it. The waters, it's really hard to explain, but they are just beautiful waters, and the waterfalls are beautiful too. And so when you're down there, you feel like you're in this desert oasis, and it really doesn't feel like you're in Arizona. It really has more of a feel like Hawaii or other more tropical type of places. So anyhow, the thing about getting there, not only do you have to get the permits, but once you do get the permits, you will end up driving down, I can't remember if it's somewhere between like 40 to 60 miles or so. It might be 35, 45, 55 miles down this backcountry native road to get to Wallapai Hilltop that you then have to park, and you're kind of on top of a mesa at this point. So you've driven for an hour or more down these back roads, and then you have to park, and then you've got to get all your gear on your back, and you have to then hike down into the canyon, and you got to follow some canyons, and it ends up, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8, 9, 10 miles or so to get to the little Native American village of Supai, where you then check in at the tourist office and you get some tags that go on your backpack so that they know that you've checked in and you've paid and you're okay to be on the reservation and everything. So they kind of have a good system going and everything. And now everything is done online, where years ago you had to try to call the tribe and it was near impossible to get through at busy times of the year. So anyhow, that's the nature of getting there. But the other things that people don't always think about is you got to hike all your water in. You're going through canyons that are pretty much dry until you get to Havasu Creek. And obviously, the time of year that you're going definitely matters a lot. Although normally when they're open, they have people coming in year round. Although we've found the best times to go when we used to go would be around April and May, and around September, October are the ideal times to go, because it's pretty brutally hot in the middle of the summer and it's pretty darn chilly in the middle of the winter. And if you go down, you want to be able to get in the waters and soak in the waters and take some good pictures and not have it be super chilly or borderline cold for camping. So when we've gone, we've always gone around those times, and they've been ideal times to be down there. We also found that the best time to start your hike was probably around 4 or 5 in the morning or so, because you're up on the hilltop. You got to hike down into the canyon. I think the first mile or mile and a half that you go is mostly dropping down at least a couple thousand feet or so in elevation down into the canyon. So you're on a lot of switchbacks and stuff like that. So if you have a headlamp on, or if it's a full moon, that can be helpful. But if you don't want to be hiking in the heat of the day, then it's best to start your hiking early. And I think we started one of the trips, I remember starting about 4:30 in the morning and being down to the bottom of the canyon right around 6 a.m. or so. And then as we came around one of the first turns, we started hearing a bunch of noise, and it started getting louder and louder, and we were wondering, what in the heck is that noise? And it was starting to get pretty loud. And so we backed up to the edge of the canyon wall and just waited to see, where is this noise coming from? What is this noise that keeps getting louder? And then pretty quick there was a cloud of dust coming, and there was a pack of wild mustangs that ran through the canyon as the sun was coming up and just ran past us. I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 wild horses. So that was pretty cool. So obviously there is water down there when you get to the creeks. So there are wild burros, wild mustangs, and everything down there too. So anyhow, that was kind of cool. And then it's just a hike through the canyons, but the scenery is really cool. The walls have a lot of different browns and oranges in them, and there's a lot of rocks that stick up, that you're big monstrous boulders and stuff that stick up in the air that you've got to make your way around. And it's interesting, even though you're hiking for hours upon hours. A lot of people might be able to get into the little village in 5 or 6 hours or so, maybe a little less, depending on how much you're carrying. Now it becomes super important to have a good balanced backpack with an internal frame, so that your weight is balanced and everything. The first time we went down, we made the mistake of not having very good backpacks, and the second time we went down, we had bought much nicer backpacks, I believe, at REI, and had a lot better gear, and it made a huge difference on just how your back felt once you got down. And I think I was carrying a lot more weight the second time, probably 50 or 60 pounds worth of gear, you have to bring all your water in too, because all the water you're going to drink when you go through the canyon, you got to have that all on you. Until you get to the campground, you don't have a spring or a hydrant to refill. So anyhow, but the little Native American village down there, it still gets mail from the U.S. Post Office on muleback. It's the only place in the whole U.S. that still receives its mail by a mule train. And there's times you're in the canyon and the mail USPS mule train will pass you, in the canyon, and you'll see them bringing in a lot of mail and packages and bundles and things like that too. So that's kind of a cool sight too, especially realizing that this is the only place in the country that this still happens. And, when you're down in the little Native American village, there's no paved roads, there's no cars. Everybody walks or rides bikes, and there are some old, more, I guess, the original Native American hogans and stuff. There's some of those down there too. So, they do have some houses that look like normal, but there's some, some of the old hogans, which are really cool to see also, just to see a piece of the past. It really does feel like you're walking around in a little village, maybe in the Old West from 100+ years ago. Doesn't feel like there's a ton of technology there. There is a store down there and a little restaurant and stuff like that too. So there are some goods you can buy, but everything, of course, is very expensive because you're extremely remote, and most of the time you're hiking in all of your food and everything, but occasionally someone wants a break from that, and there is a little restaurant there. I think everything, like I said, is pretty expensive. But if you hike past the town, about a mile and a half, I believe, is the campground. So about a mile or so past the town is Havasu Falls, and that falls, I believe, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 feet or so, maybe a little more. That fall is just a beautiful fall, but it's pretty easy to get to the bottom and wade in, really close to, the face of the waterfall and everything too. So it's really nice and refreshing. And then if you follow the creek down another mile or two, you hit Mooney Falls, which is, I think 196 feet or so. It's just under 200 feet. It's Arizona's tallest waterfall. So Mooney Falls is really beautiful too. It's a little bit more of a hike to get down to the bottom of that, and you have to go through some carved out, tunnels and hang on to some chains that are fastened into the rock and everything, but you can go down to the base of that one too, and then look up at this towering waterfall coming down above you. It's a phenomenal sight and a heck of an experience. So, just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about this particular spot, because those particular waterfalls are beyond gorgeous, and it just doesn't feel like you're in Arizona. It's a heck of an experience, and I'm sure the tribe will be opening up the whole process for permits and everything again. It's all done online now, but I'm sure once they do, there's going to be a couple years or a year worth of people that probably had things booked a year in advance that are trying to get their trips, taken at that point. So I imagine the first year they'll just be trying to catch up, and then beyond that, the demand will be probably pretty crazy for, probably a couple, 2-3 years after that before it gets back to normal. And normal would still be, fairly busy. So anyhow, but it is definitely a bucket list type of place, because it's a great thing to, a great thing to get to experience. Now you do have to pay attention to the weather. Now I know I told you about best times to go, but beyond that, you really need to watch the weather forecast, because one of the times when we were in, gosh, I'm trying to remember if it was the April-May time frame. I think it might have been, but it might have been around September or so too. I know Arizona, we have the monsoon season from shortly after the 4th of July to early September. That's when we get a lot of our rains, and it can be dangerous to be in those canyons then. But I don't believe we were quite in monsoon season. It might have been around May, I think, when we were in the canyon. And on the way out, we did get some really dark, heavy clouds. Now, this is a challenging thing about being in these canyons and being in any canyons in the Southwest, is that what can happen to you, it can really catch you off guard. And it caught us off guard. We were hiking out. We were at least halfway out. We had already come through a real narrow passageway and making our way probably the last halfway or the last half of the trip on the way out. And we noticed the clouds above us were very dark. Now, when you're down in the canyon, you can't see from, one horizon to the next. It's not like you're seeing from, 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock or whatever for, 180 degrees. You're seeing maybe 10 to 2 or so. You can see a sliver of the sky, mostly what's overhead. So it's, kind of a smaller angle, but if you see the clouds are getting pretty dark, then you got to pay attention to your surroundings and everything. And we were doing that because it was looking really heavy. The skies were getting really dark, really heavy. It wasn't raining or anything. But we know how flash floods happen in the canyons. And a lot of times what happens is that as these rains happen up on the plateaus or up above, it could be raining some really torrential rains. And if it's not right over top of you, it's not raining on you in the canyon, but it doesn't matter because all of that stuff, if it's happening couple miles away, that can be just pouring into the canyon, and that's exactly what happened to us. This started just all this rain just started coming over the side of the canyon. It's just like all these little waterfalls that started as little waterfalls pouring over the edges of the canyon that got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we started getting water build up on the canyon floor and rushing through like a desert flood. And luckily where we were at the point, I think the water was, it was going to be getting deeper and deeper as, for the people that were further down the canyon. But for where we were halfway out already and past the narrow choke point, the nice thing is it wasn't quite so deep for us, but we still had to get on high ground on the, and climb up on the edges of the side. I think we found a spot where we could get about 5 feet off of the canyon floor and had a little bit of an overhang, so we had a little bit of protection. But by this point, it was starting to rain pretty good in the canyon. And I know by the time I got my camera out, and this is prior to having, really good digital cameras or having cameras on our phones and everything, I did manage to take a few pictures as some of it was dissipating a little bit. The flood had already come through, and it was at least a foot deep where we were, maybe 1 to 2 feet, but further down the canyon, we were pretty sure the amount of water going through that it was probably, 4 or 5 feet deep, or possibly even deeper. And who knows that there's a kind of a choke point where everything, some rocks stick up and the canyon becomes real narrow, and you can tell that water gets funneled through pretty darn deep at that point. And I know we had passed some hikers that were probably about that point when the flood came through. So we know that it can be a difficult situation. You just have to watch the weather and make sure if it's supposed to rain. I guess you have to book things so far in advance. You just have to be extra hyper aware of what's going on around you. So some people think it's not a big deal. It's, I'm not getting wet in the canyon. It's not raining or whatever. But if the skies look pretty ominous and dark, then you got to watch your surroundings, look for high ground that you can get to if a flood does come through. So we got lucky that time. And there have been people that have been killed from floods coming through there. So anyhow, just a word of advice. It's a bucket list place for sure. It's a phenomenal place to be, and and when you hike in that far, the waters are really soothing when it's the right time of year, and you can get in the nice cool water and just kind of swim around or relax. It's not like super deep or powerful current or anything like that. It's more of a stream, but it's beautiful and it's relaxing and the pictures are great. So anyhow, that was something I wanted to share about Havasupai, the Native American reservation that has the phenomenal waterfalls in the western part of the Grand Canyon, Havasu Falls and Mooney Falls, which should be on your bucket list, and they're probably a little bit easier to get to than Thunder River and a couple of the other spots a little bit more east of there in the Grand Canyon.